Bad startup advice is much worse than no startup advice at all, and unfortunately there's a lot of it around. I was recently talking to a prototype stage hardware founder who was talking to an advisor who said she should absolutely not raise less than $5 million for her startup if she was going to raise it all. But that implies a valuation of something like $20 million. That would get her laughed out of every investor meeting I've ever been in. It would be tragic. So let's take a look at how you can recognize who and what advice you should take and what to avoid. Welcome to Feel the Boot, the science of startups. I'm your host, Lance Cottrell, and I'm here to help you navigate that nearly vertical learning curve you're going to encounter as you build your startup. I know what it's like. I've been there myself, and I've helped countless other founders along their journeys. Now, her advice came from a reputable investor at a large venture capital firm, and that's part of the problem. The kinds of deals that he sees all the time are huge companies at later stages growing like a hockey stick, whereas she is very, very early, just trying to prove things out. So he's applying his usual model to something where it doesn't really fit. Now, I see companies just like hers all the time through my advising and as president of the North Bay Angels. I know that the investors I work with would be looking to see her raising more like $750,000, maybe $1 million, at a valuation of say $3 to $4 million pre-money. That's the kind of deal that could actually get done. With that $20 million valuation, that would imply that the next round needs to be a step up from that, maybe $30 to $50 million. That's going to be a huge lift. So the odds are she's going to have a down round. It's going to screw up her future fundraising. It could be hugely unfortunate if she ever managed to raise money at that valuation at all, which seems unlikely. One of the big challenges is that you usually don't get a second chance to approach investors. So she was about to go out and blow her opportunity with most of her best investors that she'd try to pitch. They'd say no, and she'd be out looking for a whole new crop of potential people, which is really rough. Bad advice doesn't just fail to help you. It costs you money, time, focus, and can burn bridges. That's resources you can't afford to spend as an early stage startup, even for free advice. However, there are a few actual bad actors out there that you should be very worried about and run away from at first sight. And the first of these is people who will pay to connect you with investors. They claim to have some big Rolodex of investors that they can put you in front of that are hungry for these kind of deals, but basically they do no vetting. They will recommend anyone who pays them, and the investors know this, which means these introductions carry no weight whatsoever, if not a slight whiff that you were so desperate to pay this guy. Avoid these at all costs. Legitimate advisors helping you raise money is one thing. People who claim that they'll bring you investors and put you in front of all of their best prospects are, at best, just lying to you. Success fees are also a huge red flag. Unless you're a broker-dealer in the United States, it's illegal to ask for success fees, which means that your investors could go to court and actually get their investment back from you just when you're hitting hard times, and that would be absolutely catastrophic. Another big red flag is someone asking for disproportionate amounts of equity. That founder I was just telling you about, she had an advisor that she'd given 10% equity to, which is absolutely insane. I brought in a CEO that I only gave 10% to, but this was probably his advice. And she'd never talked to any other advisors to get a second opinion about what this person was asking. It's so important to get second opinions. The worst kind of advisors are the ones who want an exclusive relationship, where you owe them money on success, and whether or not they're the one who raised the round for you, you still owe them the money. I've seen this create horror situations for founders that I've worked with, where they end up owing 10% of their raise to someone who did absolutely nothing for them. But those are the easy ones to spot. The advice that'll really cost you comes from people who have nothing but your best interest at heart. There's a real danger with taking advice from celebrity advisors. Inherently, the more famous they are, the more credible they feel, the more weight you give to their advice. So you might give more weight to advice in a 30-second video from someone at Andreessen Horowitz rather than from a very credible and experienced advisor that no one has ever heard of that you've worked with for many hours. Free advice, like you might get with videos or just encountering someone at some event, comes with very little effort. Most of the people giving it are just giving a page from their usual playbook. They're regurgitating the usual thing that they always do and they always say that always works for them with their situation and the kind of companies they usually talk to. And that's true of my videos too. I have a particular model company in mind when I'm putting those together. You may or may not fit them, and it's important to look closely at whether it makes sense for you. So with that hardware founder, I did not lead by answering her question about what the right valuation for her should be. We started off talking about her traction, her validation, where she was with her prototype, exactly what she looked at in the market, what her competition looked like, what kind of a moat she was able to build. So I had a really clear understanding of her company. And it wasn't until almost 45 minutes into the call that I tossed out that number. And then after another 10 minutes of discussion, I began to realize that actually she wasn't even ready to start raising at all. There were some real gaps in the model that she'd put together. And so what the right valuation was entirely the wrong question. The question was, what did she need to do to be ready to raise at all? I work with a lot of European founders, and often I find that we need to restructure their decks entirely because all the advice they've been getting has been coming from videos and talks by Silicon Valley investors looking at classic Silicon Valley startups, and many of the details of how you raise money, what the valuations are like, what the investors are looking for are just fundamentally different in the UK and the EU than they are over here. And we really needed to tear everything up and start from scratch to create something that would resonate with those investors. Every piece of advice is implicitly or explicitly aimed at a very particular real or imagined company. So it's important to understand exactly what that is and whether that's what you look like in the aspects that are relevant to that particular piece of advice. So first is stage. Are you idea stage? Are you just building a prototype? Do you have an MVP, starting to get initial revenue and traction, post product market fit, growth? Each one of those have radically different implications for what you should be doing. What are your capital requirements? In the day of AI, building a software company may require not more than 1 or 2 people and a little bit of money to buy a lot of tokens. Whereas if you're building hardware, you need to go through FDA clearances for your medical device or your drug. That can require a lot of capital. And so your raises, the scale, the valuations, what you need to have in place before you raise money is totally different in each one of those scenarios. Another is opportunity size. If you're building a company where the maximum revenue you could make is $20 million, all of that VC advice goes out the door because that only makes sense if you're looking at maybe $500 million to $1 billion and have the opportunity to make an exit that they care about. And finally, founder intent. Is this person giving advice to help you build the kind of company that you actually want to build? Are you interested in creating a company where you'll no longer ever do the thing that you did at the beginning and you're going to be managing people who manage people who manage people sitting at the top of this enormous pyramid? Or would you rather be building more of a lifestyle company? Maybe you'll never have an exit that'll be billions of dollars, but could still be highly lucrative. It's really important to ask yourself this honestly and understand what is it that you want to be getting out of this company beyond just money. And the $1 billion exit is not the only way to get money. Right? You could have a tightly held company that you sell for $15 million, and that's going to be life-changing to you. But it's an utter failure to that VC. You might even build a company that just pays you $1 million a year in cash flow once you get it running. And that can be a pretty good lifestyle, even though there's no exit ever. While I was writing this episode, I had a call with a client that I hadn't talked to in over a year. And she opened the call by wanting to talk about building her company towards a target valuation. She wanted to be making at least $100 million at exit. And we talked a little bit about how that was going to work. And it turns out that what she really cares about is working with her customers. She's got a very specialized education platform, and it's critical to her that she be hands-on and they be delivering the best possible value and quality of education to her clients. And so her whole business model intentionally capped out at $3 million, which made the numbers that she was looking for completely absurd. There's no way to get to a $100 million valuation with $3 million in revenue. But we were able to explore some of the assumptions underlying how she was thinking about the company to see opportunities for a radically different structure that could allow her to get to that kind of scale. But it took taking a big step back and understanding the possibilities. So anytime you're hearing advice about startups, and you'll see it and hear it all the time, look at it through the lens of who is this for, what assumptions are they making about your business and what your intent is, and what are their self-interests? Remember, startup advice is not just about fundraising. It really applies to all aspects of your startup that you might be looking for help with. Back in the early days of Anonymizer, my board of directors had a lot of finance people on it, and they were always pushing for process and structure. They wanted OKRs, and they wanted detailed projections and high accuracy of everything. And it just wasn't something that we were able to do or made sense to spend money on. Fortunately, I had a couple of former operators on my board as well, and they were able to step in and set the record straight and say, no, this does not make sense yet. That's fantastic advice for 3 years from now when the company's bigger. But right now, this is a madhouse, and we just need to be throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks and running experiments as fast as we can and having just the minimum data we need to be able to see if that made sense, whether that worked or not. And remember, with many advisors who are pushing process and structure, they're actually consultants who want to convince you that you should pay them to help you implement this. Right? Classic conflict of interest. It makes no sense when you're 4 people in a room scrambling to build something. There's a lot of experienced business people out there who will want to give you advice as a founder. But if they've not been a founder and worked in that environment, they can be off base. But you'll often hear these people say things like, never do one-offs, never do custom work for anyone, never sell services to anyone. And that is a fantastic advice if you're post-product market fit, you've got the tool that you want to sell, and you're replicating it. But in the early days, you need to be doing things that aren't scaling. You want to be building one-offs. You want to learn what the customer needs and will pay for. Then you productize it. Then you lock out all the customization. Now, the cost of taking bad advice really depends on the scope that it impacts. Sometimes the advice is just, hey, try this little experiment, run this ad, spend $100, do an A/B test on the website, try this alternate description of your product. Those are all things that you can try in a day and have data in a week. There's very little cost to trying those. So I tend to have a very broad acceptance for that kind of advice. However, other advice is much more structural and the implications are much broader. Things like, should you be taking capital from VC and making that Faustian deal that you're going to try to go to the moon? Or completely tearing out your current tech stack and replacing it with the current hotness that some tech advisor says that you should be building everything on? Or changing who your customer is or what your core value proposition should be in your product. These are important, large decisions. You want to be doing small experiments first to see if those make sense and get some second opinions. Right? Just like you would with a medical condition, you don't want to go in for major business surgery until you know that's the right answer for you. And some of the advice you're going to be thinking about won't even come from a specific source that you can point to. It's just out there in the ether. We're bathed in it all the time. That education founder I was talking to, she said that she felt it was just in the zeitgeist that if she didn't have at least 1,000 locations, what was the point? Everything was go big or go home. But she didn't even know where she got that idea from. And that's the problem, is that all of this information that we've heard out there in the air is the least targeted information you could possibly experience. It has nothing to do with your specific situation. It can be useful when thinking about advice to dig into whether what you're hearing is data or opinion. So I could look at a company and say, I've seen 30 of companies at this stage in this kind of industry pitched to the North Bay Angels, and no one who had a valuation above $15 million ever got investor interest. That's data. I can tell you why I know this and the background on that. Whereas someone who says, your company's so amazing, you're so differentiated, you're going to change the world, there's no way that you should be raising money at less than a $20 million valuation, that's opinion. And it's worth then digging in. Where did that come from? What evidence do they have that you can or should raise money at that valuation? Those are two different kinds of information, and one of them is worth paying a lot more attention to. And I want to make a special point about valuation methodologies, where an advisor will sit down with you and use a formula to tell you, you should be able to raise at this particular valuation. And there's a bunch of them out there. I've done whole episodes on startup valuation, but the reality is they're almost never used to actually come at the legitimate number. The investor has a number in their head, and they're reverse engineering and using the methodology to get to the number that they've already decided on. And founders do the same thing. We're using the methodology like a drunk uses a lamppost, more for support than illumination. So if you're actually interacting with an advisor, make sure you ask them these two questions. First, what would need to be true for this advice not to apply? What situations would this be inappropriate for? They should be able to answer that right away. And the second is, how many other companies have they worked with? Not just a one-off conversation, but actually worked with, that share the key characteristics of your business. There should be a bunch for you to believe that this advice carries real useful information and data behind it. I even see this kind of problem in my own videos. Because I'm an angel investor, president of the North Bay Angels, mostly work with pre-seed startups looking for angel investment. That is, quite frankly, the bias I come from. Most of my videos are focused on that kind of company. Now, much of the advice that I give is applicable to any early stage business, but it's always with that model in mind that I'm talking. So when I was talking to that educational founder, I told her, a lot of this numbers you're popping out with, and when she was throwing some of my own advice back at me, I said, yeah, that's advice that I've given, but it actually doesn't apply well to your situation. I suggest you follow a different path to the goal that you want to achieve, and doing that requires you to take different advice than you saw in the videos because they weren't made for your company. So at the end of that meeting, we'd explored a bunch of other options, and she had a number of experiments to run, other options to model, and real serious decisions to make about the kind of company that she wanted to run. And it allowed her to really open up her horizons, get away from the narrow set of constraints that she thought she was operating in. At the end, she said, there are way more possibilities, and I need to be way more creative with how I'm thinking about this. That was the big insight that she was able to take away, that she was not just living in this classic startup situation. If you need feedback, help, or a second opinion, I do a limited number of first-time calls with new founder clients each month. They're an hour for $500. It's a great fit if you are a pre-seed company, early stage, looking for that kind of advice, thinking about how to build out your business. If you're at the B round and you've got product market fit and you're looking to get into that hyperscale mode, I'm not the right guy to be talking to. And if we get half an hour into that call and you decide that this is not the right direction for you, or I'm just not the right person, let me know. We'll stop it right there and I'll refund you the money. I'll put the link up there and in the description so you can grab some time with me. So the advice assessment toolkit really just comes down to two things. The first is this advice for you? Is it designed for a founder like you and a startup like yours? And second, how critical is this advice? How energy, time, and money consuming is it to implement, and how hard would it be to undo if it turned out it was not good advice? Thanks for watching this video. I hope you found it useful and interesting, and if you did, please do the usual: like, subscribe, and ring that bell. Because most of the bad actor advisors are in the fundraising facilitation space, I encourage you to next go check out this video here, all about fundraising facilitators, why they are a scam and how to avoid them. I hope that'll help you avoid any big problematic situations. Until next time, ciao.